There was a call on the radio, someone who'd called in to say that he was going to kill his wife. And that's really all the only information that we had. And I knew that where that location wasn't far from where I was driving, so I offered up to go to that house. You know, in my time as a police officer over 17 years, you get lots of calls, and some of them sound very dramatic, and then they're not really at all. So often you just have to turn up and see what it is when you get there, really. It was a really rural location, middle of nowhere, no neighbours, a small cottage on a farm. And I pulled up outside in the police car, and there's a big set of double gates into the garden, and then I can see that there's a door on the side of the house which is open. So I went through the doorway into like a little hallway, which then opened up into the kitchen, and there was a light on in the kitchen, so I could then see what we'd got. And it was a very big, sort of big kitchen diner sort of type of area. And across the other side of the room was the man that had called us. Initially, he wasn't looking at me. There was loud music playing. He'd got some sort of speaker system rigged up to his phone, and he had his phone in his hands, and he kept looking at his phone, and he was fiddling around with it, and he wasn't looking up at me. He just had his head down, and I just kept trying to say, you know, what's happened? What you've called us? What's going on? I had no idea what he had or hadn't done, whether he had done something to his wife. He then eventually he puts the phone down on the floor and turns his back to me. So he picks something off the stove and turns around, and he'd actually picked up 2 samurai swords. And I had a moment where everything slowed down, and I had so many thoughts go through my head. I haven't got my dog. There's just me here. I know my backup's coming, but they're a long way away. They don't know this is what I'm now faced with. So I start shouting at him, telling him to put the swords down. They're literally just screaming and shouting at him, put the swords down, put them down, put them down. He doesn't do that. He doesn't react to that at all. In fact, he starts to walk towards me. So I thought, well, all I've got is my pava spray, and I managed to get him across the face, and that gave him that moment where that started to hurt his eyes. So I was shouting at him to drop the swords, and he either drops them or he chooses to let them fall to the floor. I'm not sure. So I managed to slam him into the kitchen cupboards and get him onto the floor, and then I managed to handcuff him behind his back and then pinned him to the floor, and then I could then hear that there were other officers on the way. I could then hear the sirens coming. Bizarrely, his wife appeared at the doorway near where he'd been stood, and she came to the door and she said, what's happening? I heard shouting, and my first thought was, are you all right? Are you okay? And I was shouting at her, and she just couldn't believe what was happening in her kitchen. Her husband was on the floor handcuffed by a police officer, and she apparently had been asleep upstairs the whole time. You can't turn your back on what's there. The lady who was at the house, the wife, she could have needed help, you know, quite from what he was saying and how he was with me. It was quite within the realms of possibility that she was laid in the next room dying. And as a police officer and as a human being, you can't just ignore that and preserve, you know, look after number one. We're here to look after other people, aren't we? He knew that the call he'd made would prompt a reaction from the police, and that he would have police arrive at his door, and he had put those swords there for a reason. What he was going to do, I don't know, and what his intention was, I'm not sure. You know, your family do know what you do, and they read between the lines with what you tell them, but you don't want them to worry about you when you go to work every day. You know, I do this is my full-time job.